No, JP was, of course, the kind of main person around whom the entire opposition had rallied at that time. She was essentially a Democrat, and she was sensitive to public opinion, especially world public opinion. Some judges in the Supreme Court who are very robustly independent. Overall, the independence of the judiciary today is, in my view, below the level of independence which we saw during the emergency.
Hello and welcome to the New Indian Express. The emergency declared in 1975 was indeed a very dark chapter in the history of India. Leaders were imprisoned, the media was censored, and citizens were stripped of their rights. But then heroes emerged. There were leaders such as Jayaprakash Narayan, newspapers such as our Express Group, and advocates such as Shanti Bhushan to lead the good fight. Today we have Prashant Bhushan, the son of Shanti Bhushan, famous for arguing and winning the case against Indira Gandhi. He will be sharing his memories and thoughts. Welcome, Mr. Prashant Bhushan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alan.
Your father, Shanti Bhushan, was one of the key figures during the emergency. He also played an instrumental role in the protests against the emergency. How did this shape your life as a lawyer and an activist?
Well, my father was the main counsel against Mrs. Gandhi in her election case, which unseated her and which eventually then led to the emergency, because it was due to that judgment that the opposition decided to start a campaign to get her to resign, and thereafter she declared the emergency. My father was not particularly instrumental in the protests against the emergency, but he was instrumental during the emergency in setting up the Janata Party, bringing four parties together and creating the constitution for the new Janata Party, which was set up at that time. So JP had from jail designated four people from four different parties to make the constitution of the Janata Party, and he was one of those four people who made that constitution. When I look back at the emergency, I mean, I was a young man at that time when the emergency was imposed. I was just under 19 years old. And when the emergency was lifted, I was just over 20 years old, or yes, just over 20 years old. What I saw was that, yes, there was this censorship, press censorship happening. There were also a lot of people in jail. Some people who were not in jail were kind of hiding from the government. Some of the people who Mrs. Gandhi regarded as the opposition. And at that time, we also saw her as a great dictator. But to her credit, she revoked the emergency after 19 months, called for the elections, and was ousted in that election, which saw an unprecedented win for the Janata Party.
What about the role of the judiciary during emergency? Though many judges sided with the government, there were those like Justice H.R. Khanna who defended the rights of the people. Do you feel that there is a shortage of judges like him now?
No. I wouldn't say that. There are still some judges in the Supreme Court who are very robustly independent. One of them, Justice Oak, retired recently. Even Justice Sanjeev Khanna was fairly independent, and he showed his independence during his tenure, the former Chief Justice. And there are still even some existing sitting judges in the Supreme Court who are fairly independent and who will not buckle down, who will refuse to buckle down. But unfortunately, if you look at the High Court and the Supreme Court put together, High Courts and the Supreme Court, we are seeing that overall the independence of the judiciary today is, in my view, below the level of independence which we saw during the emergency. The overall independence of the judiciary has deteriorated since then.
Among the judges during emergency, Justice H.R. Khanna is seen as having the most luminous reputation. How do you see his contribution?
Yeah, so he was not regarded as one of the most brilliant judges in the Supreme Court. In fact, several of the other people who were on that same bench, Justice Bhagwati, Justice Chandrachud, were regarded as more brilliant than Justice Khanna. But Justice Khanna's main strong point was that he was not overawed. You see, the other judges got afraid. They were overawed by the scare and the fear of the emergency. But Justice Khanna didn't get overawed. And I told you that there were, before this case came to the Supreme Court, there were 10 different high courts which had all held that a habeas corpus petition is maintainable even during an emergency. So many high court judges did not succumb to this kind of feeling of pressure during the emergency at that time. So what Justice Khanna did was what several high court judges had already done. Unfortunately, 4 of the 5 judges who were in the bench with Justice Khanna succumbed to this fear. Of course, maybe the Chief Justice at that time, Justice A.N. Ray, who was appointed after superseding 3 senior judges of the Supreme Court, he may have just wanted to toe the government's line. He was always wanting to toe the government's line. He was, in that sense, politically compromised. But some of the other judges were not politically compromised, but they showed complete lack of spine and lack of courage. And Justice Khanna showed that courage and spine, which made him stand out. But as I said, there were several other high court judges at that time who had stood up and showed that spine and that courage.
J.P. Narayan was the lightning rod and the leader who mobilized the successful opposition. How would you remember JP as a person and a politician?
No, JP was, of course, the kind of main person around whom the entire opposition had rallied at that time. And it was his rally in Delhi at India Gate on the 24th, which drew, it is said that the crowd there was perhaps 40-50 lakhs. And in that rally, the entire opposition led by JP called for the ouster of Mrs. Gandhi. And that then led to the emergency after a little over a day. On the midnight of 25th, she declared the emergency, thinking that that these people were not only going to oust her, but were going to create, I mean, every dictator you see, or every person is able to believe whatever you want to believe. So she probably believed that if she doesn't declare an emergency, there will be chaos and disorder in the country. So in her mind, she probably convinced herself that she was declaring the emergency not essentially to save herself, but to save the country. This is how she must have convinced herself in her own mind. But as I said, that she was essentially a Democrat, and she was sensitive to public opinion, especially world public opinion. And therefore, when she saw that public opinion across the world is criticizing what she has done by declaring the emergency and the throttling of democracy, etc., then she decided to revoke the emergency and go in for elections. Of course, she must have believed that she would probably win the elections, but that was not to be. So JP was, of course, a very important figure, because even after the emergency was lifted, though he remained in hospital because his kidneys had failed and he died soon thereafter, but he became the kind of most respected and revered figure who was morally much more powerful than the prime minister who was appointed, that is Morarji Desai. But most of these people remained in jail during the entire period of the emergency. Most of the main opposition leaders remained in jail. And therefore, Therefore, they could not do very much. They only came out when the emergency was lifted and the elections were announced. But JP was certainly the most important figure among all of them and the most charismatic figure among all of them at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Bhushan.
Thank you, Alan.